Welcome to the Tuesday, October. Boy, man, is it like the 7th now? 10th? What day is it?
It is the 11th.
The 11th.
The 11th of October.
The October 11th edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast. Joe Bartel, Jake Letarski getting you set for the Week 6 waiver wires. First bye week as well, too. So we'll get you all covered on that and more once we get started with the show. Again, welcome to the Tuesday, October 11th edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Joe Bartel, follow me at JB Fantasy Sports. Jake Letarski at RotoJake. We've been doing this now for a month and a half. It's time. We've hit bye weeks. If you were relying on the Lions players, because why wouldn't you over the first months of the season? You're going to have to deal with that. DeAndre Swift, thankfully, don't have to deal with his injury concerns. Jamal Williams, sadly, will be out. Many more bye players that we'll have to discuss. And obviously, we have the Rashad Penny out for the season news. What does that mean for Kenneth Walker? Do you trade for him? Do you pick up what? That is your waste your FAAB budget if he's available type of player. We'll get to all that and more. Before we do so, let's get a word from one of our sponsors, No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today, playing pick'em contest versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of thousands of dollars every week. You can test your skills versus the house and 20 times your entry if you hit all of your picks. Bet on 5 player props, over-unders, or individual player matchups across every major league sport, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up now with your promo code NHWIRE. That's NHWIRE at No House Advantage, or download the app on app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out your No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined, because it's not just how you play, but also where you play. You won't want to miss out on this. Okay, hey, so we get Week 6 waiver wire, Jake. I think we should spend a little time discussing the Monday night game. We've had a couple of weeks now where, we always recap the Monday night game to start.
Yeah.
Been kind of boring, been a little bit frustrating. Not the case here. Obviously, AFC West, besides the Broncos, continues to deliver in terms of entertainment. And so does Josh McDaniels, who decided to completely fumble the game away, go for the 2-point conversion, didn't work. And Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow tried to outwit themselves on losing for the Raiders as well, too. And obviously, we had Devontae Adams post-game just obliterate the cameraman and then apologize weekly on Twitter. That's all cool. He's not a Packer player anymore, so I can just get angry at him.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from what was a wild one?
There's just so much to unpack with this game, right? It was, you're right, first an actual good game. Of course, you have Travis Kelce, 4 touchdowns. That's a Monday Night Football record. He's an absolute monster. We were joking around, or not really joking, having a serious conversation about redraft. If you redrafted for this season, rest of season today, Cooper Kupp, Saquon Barkley maybe, and then Kelsey's the number 3 overall pick. So any of you managers that were able to take him in the second round are sitting pretty there. Otherwise, yeah, the Devontae thing at the end I almost missed because I turned it off and went straight to the old office to finish up the outline here for today's show. But, of course, that came up on Twitter. He's still the biggest factor in the passing game. Of course, Darren Waller got injured like super early on. I remember I was actually sweating a matchup. I had Kelsey, they had Waller, and it was like within 2 points. And then, that sweat ended very quickly. But we'll have to see what's going on with the Darren Waller situation here. Hunter Renfrow's back. Devontae was the biggest factor. And I thought had a chance maybe to make a play at the end. It wasn't the greatest throw by Carr, but he could have made, maybe could have made another play there. So his frustration is understandable there. Fantasy-wise, Josh Jacobs looks great. For the Raiders. He's pretty much dominating the touches there. And I wonder if it's a situation of where he's finally actually fully healthy. There's always been some kind of small injury with him where, he'll show up on the injury report. He'll end up playing anyway, but he's never actually 100%. He looks good. He looks like probably a late first, early second round pick, someone you'd look at the turn if you talk about that redraft today. So he looks good. And then the other notes ahead down here were with the Chiefs receivers beyond Kelsey. Marquez Valdez-Scantling had 8 targets, caught 6 for 90. Did have a pretty not so good-looking drop at the end there. Of course, as Packers fans were quite familiar with that. Of course, Juju, he still looked better than Juju. 3 catches on 8 targets for only 33 yards. I had a lot of Juju. I think I'm willing to take my lumps on that because he's just not a red zone threat like Kelsey is, and he's not guaranteed to dominate the targets in that group. by any means. So, I'll take my lumps on that. I'm not cutting him yet, but he's certainly a bench wherever I can afford it. And on top of that, the roughing the passer.
Oh,
right, we have to talk about that again. I don't know if Jeff and Nick hit on the Tom Brady situation yesterday, but they got this one just as bad, if not worse. I mean, it's the first ever roughing the passer to be called when the defender had the ball in his hands, actually. So more history on Monday Night Football here. That was a huge swing. It turned a surefire turnover into a field goal for the Raiders, and I can understand the frustration the Chiefs fans were showing there. They were letting them have it. They were getting showered with some beer cans again. I'm never a guy that's going to throw a $12 beer on the field, but to each their own. That's rough, and I'm always torn with these things. There's the old school mentality in me that wants to say the game's getting soft, and that's a clearly easy sack. But then there's the other side that says I want football to exist forever, so whatever has to happen for football to exist forever is what I'm down for there. And you could almost see it on the Raiders side early when Crosby was getting through. They would hug Mahomes and then stop. Right, so that's almost what you have to do now as a defender here. It's is it no taking a quarterback to the ground? That is sad in its own right, but unfortunately, it looks like something we're going to have to deal with.
Obviously, the Chris Jones one was awful. We as Packer fans have been well aware of this with Clay Matthews. What was that, 3 or 4 years ago? Led to the tie game with the Vikings. Still, I think one of the most egregious calls of all time in the NFL. I'm upset by it, as everyone is on Twitter. I saw Skip Bayless. Not that we ever want to give Skip Bayless as much mic as possible, but he had tweeted the reason that this is all happening is because that Tua injury occurred, and now it's the NFL trying to reinforce that we're protecting the quarterbacks. I had no issue with the tackle of Tua. I had plenty of issue with Tua playing to begin with. That tackle, it was a hard tackle, but it wasn't the reason why. Things got to this point. So if that is actually what's happening, and actually makes a little bit of sense. Stop, NFL, because this is not the product that we want to see in the field. The Chris Jones one is going to go down as one of the worst calls as well this year for sure. You mentioned
it's not over. I think we need to. I think we need to prepare ourselves for this to happen. And if there's going to be 16 games a week, this is going to happen at least once a week.
I tend to agree with you as well. You mentioned Josh Jacobs. This is playing for a contract extension, Josh Jacobs.
There we go.
If there is one thing that we have learned in the NFL that is projectable, it's these guys that, so long as they stay healthy, are in the final year of their contract, end up doing way better than they have over the past couple years of their career.
Well, see, I thought that was going to be Juju on his 1-year deal. That was a big part into my analysis of loving him, I guess. Yeah, that's quite different. But, with it being the contract year, they're finally kind of running him into the ground, if you will. I feel like it looks like the Raiders have no intention of re-signing him. 80.4% of the snaps, and that wasn't even his season high. Last week, 89.2% of the snaps for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, if you have Zamir White or anybody like that, if you're rostering Zamir White with the same intention that you do with Samaje Perine for Joe Mixon, if that top guy were to get injured, you have an opportunity. Obviously, Jacobs has had injury history in the past. I feel like it's like DeMarco Murray when he was in his contract year with the Cowboys, and they're like, oh, you know what? Let's just give him 300 carries, and then sure, just go to the Eagles, wherever else, because I know we've just running into the ground. That kind of feels like what the play is for Jacobs, but he might be playing himself to the point where they have to re-sign him because he has been electric. You had also mentioned MVS. Just worth pointing out that the Chiefs have the Bills next week. Obviously, everyone's excited for that AFC. That was the divisional round, wasn't even the championship, right? Yeah, The divisional round rematch. They are technically, the Bills, the fourth best team against opposing wide receivers. Now, is that perhaps because they played Kenny Pickett and the Steelers this past week? Yes. I don't think that Bills secondary is that good. But if you're hoping to pick up MVS after a good Monday night game, I wouldn't necessarily guarantee it. The Chiefs have been rotating the guy who really does well, like they told us was going to happen at the beginning of the season.
And that stat is with at least 2 quarters. You could argue 2.5, 3 quarters of the season of just throwing the towel and not having anything to play for because they're ahead by so much, and you can play the soft coverage. So think about that. They could easily be number 1 if they really gave it for the whole game. And I was doing the inactives on Sunday morning, and the Bills had a couple, Oliver and one more defensive lineman that had both missed a couple weeks, and they were back. So they're getting healthier on defense and better on defense, which is it's just amazing to think about.
Yeah, and so Bills this week, Niners, who are the 6th best team against wide receivers the following week. I'm not jumping out to get MVS if he is available. I'm just saying that even though the Chiefs are great and I think we'll be fine in those matchups, bit of a concern. Okay, so bye weeks, I've been teasing it now. We have 4 teams. This is the first start of it. Thankfully, we're not missing a ton of really good teams. I mean, the Lions,
Mhm.
who've been one of the best offenses in the league, it's crazy to think about, except when they play Bill Belichick. You have the Raiders, obviously, who played yesterday. Titans, Derrick Henry managers need to be worried.
Mhm.
And then the Texans, again, finally got their
Yeah.
win. That's great. One of the worst teams in the league. Brandon Cooks, that's about it.
Yeah, fortunately, no huge quarterbacks here. I mean, if you're relying on Goff, you were streaming. Derek Carr probably wasn't your first, or if you took Derek Carr in drafts, you have someone else to think about. So, not a major week for streaming quarterbacks, but we have some news and notes for you still.
Yeah, we had mentioned Bailey Zappi, Teddy Bridgewater, Kenny Pickett last week, as well as Geno Smith. Well, yeah, Teddy Bridgewater get concussed pretty much right away in that blowout loss to the Jets. Was Skylar Thompson, right? Was their 7th-round pick, ended up starting and not starting, but playing poorly. It sounds like Teddy's trending in the right direction, that he should be available.
Again, we go back to the Tua hit, and the NFL. Maybe I don't know if there's. I feel guilty saying overcorrecting. Because they should do the right thing to do, to make sure to preserve the longevity of their players in the game, and I get that. But this is a situation where the independent neurologist cleared Teddy Bridgewater, similar to the independent neurologist that cleared Tua, right? But it was because the spotters saw Teddy wobble once. They were just making sure, because I mean, I guess if there's any team that you're going to be stricter about than any other team, imagine making the mistake and then repeating it the very, very next week. How it was a bad enough look as is. So understandably, they held Teddy Bridgewater out for the rest of the game, but I wouldn't be surprised if he clears concussion protocol and comes back. I haven't heard on Tua yet. We don't really know. Ideally a multi-week absence after he's doing his finger thing on the field, that probably that has to happen there. But in any case, I'm not crazy about streaming either of those guys. Teddy could be if you really need to.
Against the Vikings, inconsistent defense, I think.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Baker Mayfield has a high ankle sprain. I think he had the MRI, it was fine, but this is now the Matt Rule-less Panthers. I can't
arguably addition by subtraction, right?
I can't imagine the Panthers can play worse with a new head coach and new plan. But Baker Mayfield is out. Sam Darnold apparently isn't ready yet either. So enter Mr. XFL himself, PJ Walker, who actually looked okay. I think I saw you post like 12 or 13 fantasy points in relief of Baker Mayfield.
More than Stafford this week.
I was going to say in the blowout loss to the 49ers. I play in a few Superflex leagues. We did the Vegas league, actually, the Vegas Superflex that we had reviewed. I'm going to be kind of heavy in on PJ Walker with the assumption, hey, they have weapons. Christian McCaffrey has been healthy. Hey, that's great.
So they have weapons. They have weapons, but they have weapons for now, is what you should say. I don't know if you want.
Bye.
Yeah, DJ Moore. That's a Packer rumor thing going around. I don't know. Maybe I'm just starting that rumor right now. Yeah, so I'd rather have him than Odell Beckham. But,
yes.
But anyway, DJ Moore. And now again, I don't know how substantiated this is, but I know apparently the Bills have reached out about Christian McCaffrey, so he's got weapons for now. And I don't know. I just can't get all that excited about him. I'd probably rather pick up and stream Cooper Rush for one more week, if I had to.
The Eagles? You weren't convinced the Eagles are good. They're 5-0 now.
Yes,
Are you ready to say it?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to take my lumps on that one. They're pretty excellent. But that was one way for me to transition into. Dak Prescott apparently needs a full week of practice before he will be cleared to play. And he resumed. We just had a level 1 update on our site not too long ago about Dak Prescott resuming throwing. Yeah, he's going to begin throwing tomorrow, actually. So I don't know if that's going to count as a full. So I guess maybe he could get a full week of practice in, but seemingly not likely. I'm pretty sure they go with Cooper Rush one more week. But again, it's Tuesday, and a whole lot could change here.
Right.
So now we get into the streamers here, the guys that you actually want. And more than a streamer for me, and I want to talk about Geno Smith. I think he is more than a streamer. I think he is someone that you can pick up and you can rely on, if you've been playing quarterback roulette since Trey Lance went down or since Dak Prescott went down or something.
Stafford.
Yeah, or if you have Stafford, exactly. I'm considering trading Mostert for Carr in one league that I have Stafford. It's going to be Mostert for Carr and Madison is my offer because I have Stafford and Mostert's like my RB5 in that league because we're stacked.
You got Carr on bye this week, so doesn't really help you.
We'll wait for one more week.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the point. Geno Smith, it's not just that he got hot for a little bit anymore, and it's not just that he was doing, that he was overperforming. When you watch some of the tape on him, he is making elite like Mahomes level throws where he's scrambling out, rolling out from pressure and throwing, off his back foot to hit his receiver in stride. He looks good. Like I never thought I'd say this at week 6, but Geno Smith passes the eye test. And if the season ended today, he'd finish top 5 in MVP voting, which is
Geno Smith would finish top 5 in MVP voting.
The season ended today.
No.
Maybe I'm getting spicy.
Yes, you are. That would they're what, 2-3?
If Seattle makes the playoffs,
they're not.
Okay. If Seattle makes the playoffs, he deserves some votes. I'm saying that. Anyway, sure. Okay, so maybe I'm going a little overboard, but out of all the streamers this week, I'm looking at Carson Wentz, shoulder injury on a short week against the Bears. No, thank you. Justin Fields, doesn't even matter, whatever the situation is. That's a no, thank you. Jameis Winston, 32% versus the Bengals. If he even plays, yeah, maybe you could do that. Matt Ryan against the Jags. That's probably the second best streaming option this week. Jimmy G at Atlanta. I guess you could get away with that one. That one's okay. Daniel Jones, 22% versus Baltimore. Giants look oddly productive, and then I don't know. I can't explain it. They shouldn't be good, but they are.
So I'll say this. I actually think this is a pretty good week if you need to stream quarterbacks. You're right. Geno Smith, to me, feels like the top one. Not even that Geno hasn't been playing good, because he has. Not MVP level. Let's not get too carried away. But he has played very well. It's also the Cardinals are just atrociously bad, and we'll talk about in a little bit, are missing probably their 17th running back. Like, this is a team that's pretty decimated on a lot of different fronts, and I think morale-wise, it seems to be very clear that's the case. Matt Ryan against the Jaguars is fine. It's been inconsistent. We actually had to use your question, at what point should I get worried if I have Michael Pittman? I'm saying just temper your expectations a little bit, but yeah, I get it. And Alec Pierce kind of
I'd be trying to go out and acquire more Michael Pittman at this. So, it's a buy low for me.
Good. And Alec Pierce, even if Alec Pierce emerges as a clear wide receiver 2, and he looked great against the Broncos on Thursday, that only helps Michael Pittman, in my opinion. That's fine. Garoppolo against the Falcons defense just isn't good enough. And I think Garoppolo is fine at managing. Same instance for Daniel Jones and the Ravens, who seem to be missing all their secondary members. I don't know. Jake, I'll be honest with you. I may have gambled on the fact the Giants would win outright against the Packers. They can't even handle West Coast travel. So going into London, I thought there was no way they would win. And sure enough, they blew it like they always do. I don't know if the Packers are a good team, but I'm pretty certain the Giants are not, even though they're 4-1. And I know that's going to upset any of our New York fans.
Oh, I'm sure
they're just telling you how it is, though.
Direct all at JB Fantasy Sports. At Roto Jake is innocent in this.
Yeah, so Daniel Jones, I actually do think is a fine start. He looked certainly competent, but I will blame that on Joe Barry more so than the guy that we've seen stink for 4 years now, and Daniel Jones. Anybody else? Kenny Pickett, Mariota, Zach Wilson against the Packers. I would be fine starting him too.
Yeah, that's serviceable as their weapons get healthy, and as Breece Hall looks like a legitimate, fantasy dynasty all-star type of player. You could buy that. Pickett is the same for me. Going into last week, we kind of had that conversation where you pick him up because of the unknown, and he had a lot of yards against Buffalo, but wasn't, still more points than Stafford. Right. But again, he didn't show me enough to want to start him. He showed me enough to stash him on my bench if I'm really in need of quarterback. But he didn't quite show me enough this past week to throw him out there against Tampa Bay, even in a home game. I think that's going to be ugly for him.
Any other quarterbacks are we good to move on there?
No, pick up Geno Smith and consider getting him in your rotation, no matter what.
To win MVP, according to Jake. Yeah, that's right. All right, before we get over to the running backs, let's take a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Again, for the video audience, we'll be right back. Audio audience, stick around here a little bit. Okay, so running backs, obviously the big guy for this week is going to be Kenneth Walker. So we talked about Nyheim Hines, who got concussed almost immediately on Thursday. Mike Boone, interesting. We'll have to consider him as well, too, as we continue on the conversation. Tyler Algier, I'll be honest, I didn't even watch enough of the Falcons and Bucks to know. I think it's fine enough. And then you had guys like Mostert, who clearly seems to have supplanted Chase Edmonds. Rashad White, interesting case as well, too. He seems to take some snaps for Fournette. Those are all guys we talked about that last week. It's the Kenneth Walker show this week.
Yep, he's the cover boy.
45% rostered on Yahoo, 47% rostered on ESPN. It is entirely possible that if you're listening to this podcast and you spend time on Kenneth Walker, you'd be like, well, guys, he's not even available. I play with a lot of smart people, and there's pretty deep benches. Of course, he was picked up for this exact opportunity. Rashad Penny, done for the season. Your second-round pick this year now. Kenneth Walker enters the foray. And you mentioned the Seahawks are playing better than we would have anticipated. Not MVP level, but better.
Fair enough.
I mean, this is clearly you spend your whole FAAB if by
Oh yeah,
some
your
miracle
top waiver
Walker
priority,
available.
the entirety of your FAAB. I don't care if you have $100, punch in $100, and hopefully you have a higher waiver priority than the other guy who punches in $100.
Right.
Because this is the man. And it's real tough because for me, I was a Penny guy this season.
Mm-hmm.
More than a Walker guy. I wasn't all that interested. And through 5 weeks, I think I can pretty confidently say I made the right call. Now, of course, injury is switching things up. But yeah, there's not a whole lot to say here because Rashad Penny broke his leg, out for the year. Travis Homer, he's got a ribs injury. He's on IR. DJ Dallas is a special team. So it's basically Kenneth Walker in the practice squad. Maybe they mix a little bit of Dallas in the passing game. But, this is a pretty solid upcoming schedule, too. I mean, versus Arizona, at the Chargers, versus the Giants, at Arizona again.
He's running for 200 yards.
Yeah, exactly. All of those teams I just listed are bottom half of the league run defenses, if not worse. And like we said, Walker is the guy. The O-line isn't great. Maybe Geno Smith doesn't play this well for this long, but Walker is a clear-cut RB2 you throw in your lineup the rest of the year.
So, again, 47% roster on ESPN, 45% on Yahoo. Chances are he's not going to be available for waivers. We should play this thought process out further, Jake, because this is this is probably the most crucial possible pickup or trade or speculation you can have. So I want your opinion on, would you trade this player for Kenneth Walker? Okay, so I'm going to give you some names.
All right, let's hit it.
Deontay Johnson.
Yes.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I talked last week. I want to get rid of Deontay Johnson with whatever possible means I can. This would be a clear win for me, Kenneth Walker over him.
Mm-hmm.
I just had the question earlier about Michael Pittman struggling. Michael Pittman for Kenneth Walker.
No.
You would keep Michael Pittman.
I would keep Michael Pittman.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's say you're hurting at quarterback. What if you wanted to trade Lamar Jackson for Kenneth Walker?
I would take Lamar Jackson.
You'd take So
I want the Lamar Jackson side. I wouldn't trade Lamar Jackson.
I would as well too, even though he's been struggling a little bit.
He had a bad week, and we call it struggling. I mean, he was the MVP. Yeah, after week 3, it's so crazy how cyclical this is. After week 3, he was the shoe-in MVP, right?
Right. How about Ramondre Stevenson, who seems to have supplanted Damon Harrison, who was also injured in last game?
Ooh, that is tough because they're both in very, very similar boats. Give me Kenneth Walker in that one.
Okay, I agree with you. I would take Kenneth Walker over Stevenson.
Just because we don't know what's going on with this New England quarterback situation. At least with Walker, there's some stability.
I want to give you one more running back, and I'll go to receivers because that's a little bit easier. James Robinson, who seems to have lost a little bit of playing time at ETN, now at 50-50.
I will take Kenneth Walker.
I will too. And we had Robinson ranked 7 this week against the Texans, 7th overall. I'm trying to say we're high on Kenneth Walker.
It's like a Breece Hall, Michael Carter situation in Jacksonville, where like early on they go with the experience, they go with the guy that's been there, but the young gun is going to slowly overtake, and maybe people are going to get payoffs there on some of those draft picks they used on them.
2 more receivers.
Yep.
T. Higgins for Kenneth Walker.
I want T. Higgins.
I will trade Kenneth Walker. I will take the Kenneth Walker.
You'll take. I know T. Higgins has been banged up, and that's been frustrating.
It has.
But when he is out there, he might be just as skilled, if not more skilled, than Jamar Chase. He is an incredible player to watch.
Okay,
he's very talented.
Mr. 280-yard touchdowns himself, Gabe Davis or Kenneth Walker.
I would keep Gabe Davis.
I will take Kenneth Walker as well too.
So it sounds like you're a little bit higher on Walker than me, but we're both pretty high.
I don't know if whoever has Kenneth Walker will even be willing to trade them because oftentimes when you walk into found money, you're excited about it. Like you don't want to give it, even if it's a fair deal, you don't want to give up the found money.
Here's one I got on Twitter. This is shout out to World of KG. Would you trade DeAndre Hopkins for Kenneth Walker?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, now
you got a full month yet. Hopkins not being able to do anything.
A full month yet? Isn't it one more? I thought it was 6 games.
Oh, I was thinking you only play 6 games. Okay.
So there's like one more week. So there's one more week he's suspended, and then one bye week in there. And we got to think about that.
Interesting.
So those are both things that like you've been holding on to them this long, hoping for the payoff. Now your payoff is about to come. Which one is better? And so we have his return date as October 20th. Okay, so not this week, but next week.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I'm in tune to that because I definitely grabbed a couple of shares thinking I'm going to get a second round value in the 6th, 7th round of fantasy drafts. So I've been staying on top of that. But anyway, so this is one where I told, KG because of his team context, because it's one of those where you only start 2 wide receivers and he has good wide receivers and had an RB2 problem. I was like, I want the Walker side, but normally all other things neutral, I think I would take the Hopkins side.
I think I still might go Walker. I guess that's what I'm learning is I'm going to be really heavy on it. And it's funny, I didn't even like him as a prospect as much as maybe others did. Yeah. But the situation you talked about, Geno Smith being good, I mean, that's a huge part of this. If this is a Bailey Zappi level quarterback, no. But the Seahawks offense has been pretty good. They have been able to play within themselves. And so long as they have this rotation of running backs, I think they'll go ahead and get whatever the equivalent of Latavius Murray is off of waivers. I don't know what. I'd have to really think about the players. The Seahawks are going to get somebody like that. But I think it's still Kenneth Walker getting 25-plus touches a day every time they play, so long as he's healthy. So we spent a lot of time with the trade part of it. Again, you certainly can reach out to us on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports, at RotoJake.
Yeah. Hopefully we did arrange for a broader audience, because there's definitely a big chunk, at least 50%, probably greater if you're listening to this podcast where he's not around. So hopefully that helps out.
So it's kind of lost in our memory because it happened all the way back on Thursday. But Mike Boone ended up being okay, right? I mean, I think you were happy if you had to play Mike Boone from a Broncos perspective. He had those 3 catches, got some carries. The issue was Melvin Gordon also looked electric. Like he was very good against that Colts defense. Obviously, Russell Wilson was not, and now you have Russell Wilson having his fake little injury. I'm sure he's actually real, but that we have it just reported now after he plays his worst game of over a month-long stretch, I think is convenient. I think I'm more interested in acquiring Mike Boone now than I was last week, and he's only at 36% roster.
Yeah, so I got a couple Mike Boone, one of our tech guys outbid me by $1. I had a $27 bid in Stake League, unable to get him, but I got him in a couple of other leagues. I'm happy with that decision. He was out on the field for 41.1% of snaps, 7 carries to Gordon's 15, and both of them had 3 targets, so a pretty equal target share. And And Boone looked good running after the catch too, from what I remember of that game. I try to forget most of that game. Really tried to delete most of that game.
It got funny at a point.
Yeah. It was like, so we were playing board games and had it on in the background at one point. It's like, okay, let's move from Yahtzee to Scrabble now. But anyway, that's my life at 32. But okay, anyway, got to get back on track here. Mike Boone, he looks good. He passes the eye test to me just fine. They're not going to give Melvin Gordon any 80% snap share like Josh Jacobs all of a sudden. Gordon still was capped at 56.2% of the snaps. This is a 2-back offense, a 2-back system. Boone is going to have value outside of Melvin Gordon, outside of being a Melvin Gordon handcuff. And then if that Melvin Gordon injury happens or Melvin Gordon gets in the doghouse with a fumble, of course, I hope none of that happens. But Mike Boone suddenly gets a major boost in value here. So he has standalone value. He's worth rostering for sure.
Okay, I agree with you on that completely. So we had Josh Kelly finally have a pretty good game. I think it's worth pointing out that Austin Eckler set his single season high in rushing yards, which I would never have guessed it was only 112 before that. I know that Austin Eckler is like receiving specialist, but that it was only 112. He's been a dynamic guy for the last 3 or 4 years. To have him be that successful, 176 yards against that Browns defense, which, we are disciples of Mario Puig. Credit to Mario, who said on our Friday SiriusXM show that the Browns run defense might be worse than the Chargers, and this is going to be a game where both guys go off. They did. Nick Chubb was insane. Eckler was insane. Kudos to Mario in that one. I am not convinced Joshua Kelly is a thing other than if you were rostering the backup to Austin Eckler. Kelly has now supplanted Sony Michel on 2 separate weeks, consecutive weeks, no matter too. And Sony Michel had previously been your between the tackles ball carrier. Well, not the case anymore. Joshua Kelly is both the receiver and the Justin Jackson for previous years.
Michelle, 2.8% of the snaps, just 1 carry. He goes to the drop list, right?
Yeah,
So I'm not rushing out to grab and start Josh Kelly, but he's one of those that, is he better than the worst player on your bench right now? Does he have more upside than the worst player on your bench right now? Austin Eckler has always been known to miss a game or 2 here and there at some point during the season. So, having his clear backups, mostly if you're an Eckler owner. If you're an Eckler owner, then that value goes way up, and you want to start to think about making sure you get Kelly in some capacity.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's past years. There has never been one guy that just outright replaced him. We had Justin Jackson Last year, I think it was against the Texans, ended up doing fine because Eckler was out, but there generally isn't a one-for-one replacement. Kelly can be your receiver and runner, and Sonny Michel would just act as what Kelly does. I agree with you. I think this year, more than past years, Kelly seems to have been that guy. And obviously they had drafted the running back in the 4th round to be that player. He hasn't done anything right now. I think he's been injured for time and also struggled during the preseason. I'm blanking his name, but that's fine. If you were like me and not aware that Tevin Coleman was back on the 49ers, you should be now. 2 touchdowns on 11 touches total. He only played 27% of the snaps, but Jeff Wilson still doing his thing. Clearly Tyrion Davis-Price out with the injury. They had cut the Ohio State guy earlier who is now on the Eagles, Trey Sermon. I had also not been aware of that. Tevin Coleman, is he a thing now for the 49ers?
Yeah, we would have never guessed it at this point last week, but less than a third of the snaps. He was very efficient with his touches. He's not someone I'm going to aggressively add outside of, crazy deep leagues where you're just looking to add, warm bodies that might get the ball because, we'll see what happens as that backfield gets healthier. For me is more of a shoot, my guy I was counting on being active in the 3:00 games is injured, and now I need to pick someone up out of desperation after more than half the games have started. That's how I look at Tevin Coleman, someone who might get a couple touches, might find his way into the end zone. I don't think he's supplanting Jeff Wilson for any reason outside of injury. So he's just kind of, the backup. We did skip over Benjamin. I feel like we need to talk quickly. We need to talk quickly about the Cardinals backfield situation because, let's see, James Conner left in the 2nd quarter with a rib injury. Darrell Williams left in the 3rd quarter after hurting his knee. Now, I feel like we've had this refrain several times this season where we talk about Benjamin, then James Conner ends up playing anyway, and it ends up being a moot point. But just keep him on your radar. He's only 11% rostered. If they get to a point where they want to rest Conner and actually get him healthy. I don't know. I think they're going to be in a situation where they have to win every single game possible. But just for reference, Benjamin's coming off 8 carry, 4 target, 52.9% of the snap game. Although again, boosted by injuries, so keep him on the radar.
Not only did they had Jonathan Ward, their 3rd string running back, also get injured, so it went down to Benjamin at 4, who was the guy. It's worth pointing out Keontae Ingram, who was kind of a pet project for a few of us here at the RotoWire office. 6th round pick. He was a coach's inactive decision against the Eagles this past week. I think Ingram's actually really talented. I would not be surprised if you had just said all those Cardinal guys are out and it was Ingram in this position. He would be just as successful as Benjamin would be having this conversation again. So that's my concern. Let's just say all 3 are out. And again, it's speculative. We're doing this on Tuesday. I have no idea if James Conner will play on Sunday. That's a different question. I like Ingram from a talent perspective, and I would be surprised if that situation occurred and all those guys are just out, that Ingram was not a more critical part of that offense overall. Something to kind of mention.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the main names. You can throw Deion Jackson from the Colts out there, obviously, after Nyheim Hines left with a concussion. Deion Jackson ended up playing a significant role on the offense, a little bit more significant than Phillip Lindsay. We can speculate on Carolina runners after trade or any Carolina running back. If we think McCaffrey is going to get traded, you limit that kind of speculation to your deepest leagues where you need a lottery ticket.
I actually think that's a really brilliant idea that I had not thought of. So McCaffrey could get traded. Right? We had the rumor for the Bills. I mean, the Bills obviously make sense because they've been thirsting after a pass-catching running back. That's why they drafted James Cook, who's been disappointing.
Yeah.
McCaffrey is only due $1.14 million if you were to trade for him. He's got a $13 million deal, but it's very easy to
acquire. So you could get assets, is what you're saying.
The Panthers might just be of interest to trade McCaffrey. Like it's not just this thing that, the super teams are trying to acquire. It makes sense, especially if you're tearing things down. So of Chuba Hubbard and Deonta Foreman, which one of those two do you find more valuable in a situation where McCaffrey were to be traded?
Probably Chuba Hubbard, but again, you're dealing with the RB1 on the worst team in the league. What kind of value does that really get you?
Yeah, I guess
is kind of the situation there. Deonta Foreman was pretty much non-existent in the game, and Chuba Hubbard got a little bit of work. At least he had 15.9% of the snaps. Foreman played 3 snaps in that game. So I think you would base the tides on, it'd be Chuba Hubbard. And maybe if you're a McCaffrey manager, you should definitely go pick up Chuba Hubbard at this point. But again, it's just rumors. It's tough to speculate at this point.
So like the NFFC where we have like 20 benches or 20 bench. We have to wait 20 spots on roster. Like that's a spot where I actually really like the speculative play. Chuba Hubbard, I think, is theoretically more of their pass catcher. Does the pass catching running back still have a position with Christian McCaffrey gone for the Panthers offense? I'm not sure it's a guarantee.
McCaffrey had 12 targets on Sunday. There's some to go around.
Okay, so you're thinking it's more that that they're scheming for it, not that McCaffrey's just so great that you have to. You might be right. If that's the case, Chuba Hubbard probably has more value. But Deonta Foreman was a darling for us in the last year's podcast. Like he was really good in relief of Derrick Henry when Henry went down for the Titans. I think Foreman is the better player, but if you're saying that role of the pass catcher is there, then Chuba Hubbard is actually one too.
If you backtrack to last year after Derrick Henry and we were kind of on Deontay Foreman, Dontrell Hilliard had just as many big games. Yes, they're useful there, and there's kind of a mirror situation here. Real quick, we got to talk about cuts. Antonio Gibson's starting to get close to my chopping block. I got a lot of him early. Great story with Brian Robinson coming out. The video of him coming out to 50 Cent was fantastic. It's a great story. But Antonio Gibson, 31.7% snap share, only 3 carries compared to 9 for Robinson. So anybody who had presumed out of camp that Robinson had won the job looks to be right, because 5 weeks after getting shot, he's out there leading the backfield.
Can I just outline what this could be worst case scenario for Antonio Gibson? Obviously, 31% snap share, not great ideally. Do the Commanders roster 4 running backs every given week? My answer is probably no. So if you have Robinson doing the between the tackle stuff, J.D. McKissic is your pass catcher, theoretically the converted wide receiver should be doing that, and Antonio Gibson, but clearly the Commanders just don't want to do that. And week 1, I thought their offense was the best. Look who got more targets. It was Gibson with 7 for 78 or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. The Commanders are dumb, and they're going to continue dumb things. But if McKissic is your pass catcher and it's not Gibson, and they also have that third-string guy who has been doing special team stuff for them, I think Antonio Gibson could be a healthy and active. Like, you could be writing notes from on Sunday afternoon, which is crazy to think about if this continues to go down that path. Mm-hmm. It's bad. It's a bad spot for Antonio Gibson.
So we're getting the bye weeks where you're going to have to make tough calls on, kickers, defenses, quarterbacks in some cases, and rosters are about to get tight. I have no problem dropping him. Here's a real tougher drop. I had to bring him up, and I know you're not going to want to hear this.
I'm not.
But how about Chase Edmonds?
I'm not happy about it.
I would not be happy about it either. A 14.9% snap share. Myles Gaskin was more involved in the offense than Chase Edmonds, and Mostert's looking like a very startable RB2, by the way.
For sure.
He's looking solid here. So, Chase Edmonds, I don't know if you want to overreact to this week, but if it's a 10-teamer and you've got tough roster calls to make, I couldn't fault you.
You're right. So that is the spot. So I have him in the Superflex Vegas League. I have him a couple 12-team leagues. I'm not dropping him there. Not unless, I guess, Kenneth Walker was available and I just need a roster spot. If it's a 10-team league, I think that probably there's going to be guys. And we talked about receivers last week. We're going to talk about receivers now who I think are more valuable than what Edmonds could do even at his peak. I get 2 weeks ago, he was a great touchdown asset for the Dolphins, and now we have Tua out and down to your third string guy, and you're losing by 34 points, 24 points to the Jets. Things have gone chaotically bad for the Dolphins in such a short time that I'm not willing to just rule out Edmonds entirely. Mm-hmm. But you're right, there is some concern there. We also talked to Sonny Michel, Zach Moss. I had dropped James Cook, of course. He ends up having his best day after I dropped Cook in my Dynasty League.
I mean,
I'm still fine
4 carries, I wouldn't feel too bad about it. On the other hand, Zach Moss, 28.6% of snaps, 1 carry, 0 targets. And one of those guys is on the verge of being healthy and active if they acquire someone.
Yeah, if they do get Christian McCaffrey. We have a ton of trade questions in particular in the chat. I promise we're going to get to them if we have time towards the end, but I want to stick to the waiver wire portion, especially for the audio audience who's possibly using these for different roster purposes. Let's get to the wide receivers. Before we do so, I'll get a word from our sponsor, Swagger. There are 50 million fantasy sports players and sports bettors in the U.S., but 90% of all cash prizes are won by 2% of players. That's because most sports gaming options were created for pros. The dude's dropping loads of cash on data to find an edge over the rest, not Swagger. Swagger is a daily fantasy sports site created for sports fans who simply want some skin in the game and a real shot at winning. Tired of losing because of one bad pick? Well, Swagger, you don't have to worry about that because they'll be perfect. You don't have to be perfect to win, I should say. You simply create a ticket of 4 to 10 simple player props and score points for the ones you get right. Your score determines your win, not the perfect ticket, so you could be half right and be all right with Swagger. Swagger offers the most player props and biggest payouts of any DFS site, as much as 50 times your money. Plus, you can play fantasy football along with all the major U.S. pro sports, as well as international soccer, Formula One, NASCAR, fighting sports, rugby, cricket, and even esports. Ready to play? Visit playwithswagger.com/RotoWire to sign up, and Swagger will give you $10 free to try and then match your first deposit up to $100. 100% match up to $100. Swagger, daily fantasy sports for all fankind. Last week ended up being a pretty heavy wide receiver week. We had mentioned Michael Gallup. George Pickens was a huge guy with Kenny Pickett there. Josh Reynolds, we weren't sure what Amon-Ra St. Brown's stats would be. Well, St. Brown plays. Reynolds still gets 10 targets this week. Yes. He seems to be pretty clearly up in that spot. Corey Davis at that point too. I think this week it's the Jacoby Myers week, who's only been at roster at 48%, had been out the week before against the Packers. Before that was a serviceable guy, right back again, even with Bailey Zappi, 7-8 for 111 and touchdown.
Yeah, so starting to do this outline, I thought to myself, dang, it's a really slow week for wide receivers. But the more I started to unpack it, I started finding new names that I wanted to add. And Jacoby Myers was one that I almost overlooked him for the entire show because I thought he would have been well over our threshold. Looked for the heck of it, 48%. And I'm thinking, I guess that makes sense. He missed a couple games with injuries, and now he's got Bailey Zappi. But he comes back, catches 7 of 8 targets for 111 yards and a touchdown. Now, he's normally the normal narrative with Myers is, a PPR darling, going to get a ton of volume, short yards, that kind of thing. With Bailey Zappi, Belichick definitely isn't passing as much. There's more of an emphasis on the run game. We'll see if he sticks to that with Ramondre Stevenson as basically the bell cow there.
With Damon Harris out multiple weeks. I wasn't aware that actually happened, but that's more or less confirmed that Damon Harris will not play for a little while.
But yeah, so the narrative on Myers is, nice PPR volume guy, not really a touchdown scorer. Then, of course, he scores a touchdown last week, and now I'm thinking about starting him over. I'll be starting him over Elijah Moore. I'll be starting him over. I can't start him over Tyreek Hill, even though he's injured and has a possible rookie quarterback. I can't quite make that move, but it gets interesting, just to think of some real life examples. But in a similar sense to Kenneth Walker, Jacoby Myers is the top pickup if you can get him at wide receiver.
Yeah, he had that touchdown. I remember, famously, he had that 3-year stretch essentially where he hadn't scored, and then finally last year got the
has to have some kind of record for most receiving yards without a receiving touchdown, at least in the modern era.
I like him a lot too. He's been kind of like one of those Mr. Reliables. Not that Marvin Jones you're excited about. I know Marvin Jones had a good week this past week, but was inconsistent. That never happens with Jacoby Myers. He's just consistently getting you 10 points in a PPR league and fine with it. So we have a couple names here. Alec Pierce actually is the one I want to jump to next because I thought he played brilliantly on Thursday and was like a key factor in the Colts ended up getting that upset win. I know it was a gross game and hopefully no one had to watch it. Alec Pierce has been quietly emerging as, I think, a very capable wide receiver 2 for that team. And as we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, just because Pierce is your wide receiver 2 doesn't hinder Pittman. There's very little passing game around that you can have 2 guys, especially in today's modern NFL, be available and be fantasy assets.
I think it's fantastic for Pittman once they get Taylor healthy, and the fact that Alec Pierce has emerged. That's only going to help him, of course. Pierce is someone whose role is growing. 5, 6, and 9 targets over his last 3 weeks, and his snap share has grown progressively over those last 3 weeks as well. He's the clear number 2 to Pittman, obviously 8 for 81 yards. What's interesting with him is that last week, so the last 3 weeks I mentioned snap share, 44.9, 46, 60.3. That's growing. That's encouraging. Paris Campbell had 93.2% of snaps last week, so he was on the field more.
He's a decoy.
But when Pierce is, you can't. Someone like that can't be a decoy. You have to be a threat to be a decoy, right?
Your speed is the threat. I think that's what the Colts are utilizing.
There we go. I believe that. But anyway, the point I wanted to make is I want to reiterate a point because Alan and Jeff do these brilliant sneaky ads videos, which is like the 5-minute version of our long show. And Alan was mentioning how the Colts. A lot of people thought the Colts reached to get Alec Pierce, took him ahead of several receivers that were, ranked higher by traditional consensus. So clearly they like the guy and they want to get him involved. So he's somebody that gets, it gets to be very interesting to me. And I think he's under the radar enough that you can probably get away with like a $6 or $7 FAAB bid and get him on your team.
Yeah, I think so, especially in normal leagues. Something like a stake league, there's no shot. I bet you he's rostered in your stake league.
But in stake league, it's going to take, I think, 17 probably. Yeah.
So I guess here's the part. I do a bit more of the prospect stuff than you do, and I certainly talked to Mario enough, and I'm aware of it. We knew a lot of things about Alec Pierce coming out of college at Cincinnati, that he was a speedy guy, right? I think he ran either 4.4 or 4.3, low on 4.3. He was fast, and he could make those big plays. We never really saw him play above the rim. If you watched that Thursday game at all, he was making critical contested catches consistently. I mean, and that's all the reports we've heard out of the Colts camp was not only that he was as fast as we thought he was, but he could go up and get those catches. if that is really part of his prospect profile, and clearly it is, I think we have been reinforced over multiple weeks. There's literally nothing Pierce can't do. Like I think he is one of the better rookie receivers of this class, which has been pretty good, right? Chris Olave, clearly Rookie of the Year winner, if as long as he's a front runner, I should say.
Another bad head
I don't
injury,
want to do
man.
another
So
MVP
many of these
thing that you did with Geno Smith, but I think
got to be
Olave's
bold, man. Come out hot. Call him Rookie of the Year.
Drake London looking pretty good. I think Alec Pierce is a guy that you can roster, and especially now as we hit bye weeks, can and will start as a flex wide receiver 3, even in your 10-team leagues. I think that's how good he has been. Can we talk about Darius Slayton? I mean, I know we were trying to forget the Packers game, but
we're going to have to. I mean, he led the team with 7 targets. He's basically all that's left because, you got Kenny Galladay out, Shepard out, Tony and Wan'Dale Robinson were both out, but they're both probably coming back soon. Slayton has just quietly been around. I feel like we've talked about him on the Waiver Wire show for the last 4 years because we forget about him. He gets dropped. Then other people get injured and Slayton becomes involved. So he's consistent in that sense, but definitely behind guys like Myers, behind guys like Alec Pierce. I even put Slayton behind a guy like Rondale Moore, who interests me quite a bit. He's only 18% rostered, caught 7 of his 8 targets for 68 yards, even got 2 carries for negative yards. But the fact that he's getting used in that way is encouraging. Now, I wrote down that maybe he loses some value when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, less targets to go around and all. But, talking with our tech guys on the other side of the wall, they made a pretty good case to me that DeAndre Hopkins coming back probably helps him, takes more attention away. And the fact that you've got DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown, you got a sneaky, speedy guy like Rondale Moore in the slot.
I think it hurts Zach Ertz. That would be my guess. Like if you said Hopkins comes back, the tight end 5, whatever Ertz is right now, that would be because theoretically you're in the same range of the field. Rondale's fast.
Yep.
Marquise Brown is fast, and he has the connection with the Oklahoma days too.
Yeah, I can see Rondale Moore on reverses. Yeah, just general carries, swing passes.
And he's like more consistent than Christian Watson, which is what the Packers are using.
And those are all, exactly. I would have not thought that's how they use Christian Watson. Anyway, that's a different conversation. Yeah. But anyway, I need all those swing passes are a point in PPR. Rondale Moore's interesting to me, and I know he got a lot of hype last year, and then of course the injuries to start this year.
Even end of draft season, he was also a guy going. I took him in the 10th round in the beat Joe Bartel NFFC draft. I agree with you. I'm in on Rondale Moore at least to a certain extent. 12-team, 14-team, that'd be probably where I'm.
I took him late in my Kyler Murray 14-team league, just as like the under the radar stack, just in case that works. Throw a gamble and see what happens, and I'm cool with that.
The issue ends up being there. So we talk about running backs. I keep pausing. I'm sorry, interrupting.
Yeah, go for it.
There's so many wide receivers that we think are good, and even last week you add on the George Pickens and even Josh Reynolds of the world. You can't roster 8 receivers. Like at some point, you have to commit to these Samaje P. Ryans and other running backs. So in a 12-team league that has, let's just say, 16 roster spots, everyone should be going after the Rondale Moores. Like there should be enough people that maybe he's not paying attention. Someone's 1-4, 1-5. That's where I think the issue is. And at 18% roster, it feels clear that
he definitely falls into the high upside guys you stash on your bench category as opposed to consistent starters, because I don't think he'll be super consistent, but he will have some big weeks. Then I wrote down Randall Cobb. I feel like we have to talk about him after he gets 13 targets, finished with 7 for 99. It's like he was the consummate pro that didn't seem to have any issues with London. And he was, catching balls in traffic. He really turned the clock back. We'll see how long he can keep that up.
Right. Yeah.
It'll be very interesting here.
So, like in comparison, I would rather have more Pierce, Myers, possibly even Slayton. If you told me Wan'Dale Robinson and Kadarius Toney are out for multiple weeks, because we mentioned the Giants' schedule when we were discussing Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
If you forget, like when Daniel Jones first came to league, Darius Slayton was his guy. That was when Darius Slayton emerged. It was because of Daniel Jones. Yeah, I like seeing Randall Cobb be vintage Randall Cobb, but I'm not convinced that will be something that is worth rostering.
The signing of GM Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And then I threw a handful of guys. We can just do quick hitters on here. In theory, Westbrook Akeen should be more active with Traylon Burks on IR. 1% roster. He costs you nothing. Maybe you think about it if you're in a really deep league. Dynami Brown had that huge line for the Commanders, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 long touchdown passes. It seems a little fluky to me. Best ball guy at best, You pick him up, you'll be better be ready to take a 0 for a couple of weeks, but might have 1 or 2 more of these games the rest of the year.
I didn't intend to be the Boosty Friday SiriusXM show, but Mario and I actually did do a little bit of a segment on Diami Brown. I like him more from a prospect profile than you do, but it's only because this was.
I'll admit I don't know a ton about him. You could educate me right now and tell me.
Was out, so then I was like, oh hey, well if there's this third guy. And Diami Brown, I know Amon-Ra St. Brown buried him earlier this year when he was talking about people drafted before him and Brown did nothing. Again, Commanders are really stupid. Very, very stupid team. I think Diami Brown is probably like a wide receiver 3 in most teams, but they are actually pretty good at wide receiver. He's explosive. He can make the plays. And when you think about the Commanders' offense, it's Carson Wentz throwing. He's going to give you some bad plays, but good plays too. If Jahan Dotson is out or if Curtis Samuel gets injured, I actually kind of think Diami Brown is interesting, but I wouldn't roster him at any point. We need to see things consistently work out in his favor for that to occur.
You know who else is a little interesting to me is Khalil Shakir. We
have user questions about that.
We briefly mentioned him last week, so we didn't do a full segment on him. To me, that's dependent on the Buffalo injury situation. As long as Diggs, Davis, and I don't think Shakir passed Isaiah McKenzie necessarily. He had a good game.
McKenzie didn't play this week.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think McKenzie still takes that role when Shakir's around, but and I think also it was a concussion for McKenzie. I had him slotted in as like a wide receiver 3 in multiple leagues, and he was a surprised inactive because I didn't quite clear concussion protocol, even though he shed his red non-contact jersey on Friday. I did the Bills inactive, so you maybe read my work if you had McKenzie this week. But Shakir is very interesting. Definitely like him for long-term formats, but to me, the utilities is probably only there if one of those 3 receivers is down.
Yeah, and you talk to the smarter people in the prospect game, they would say Shakir is clearly an upgrade over McKenzie, but that doesn't mean NFL teams see it that way, especially when rookies, you need to like earn that, and maybe this is a good first step for Shakir.
And McKenzie has had several big games for the Bills.
Well
he's proven himself.
Exactly, yeah. I'm with you, and Shakir is one of those I'm watching, but if you're in dynasty leagues, he's already picked up. I would maybe like speculatively trade from him if I could. And in redraft, he just isn't in the spot where he can be. So Donovan Peoples-Jones did fine enough. David Njoku's been okay there too. Marvin Jones, I had mentioned earlier, had that 104 yards on the 11 catches. Even though Zay Jones is back, that's just a confusing.
That's fluky to me. Christian Kirk was just like disappeared in this game for whatever reason. So
I
don't know. I put a 4-pack on the list: Peoples-Jones, Marvin Jones, Ben Skowronek, and Olamide Zaccheaus. With Pitts out in that situation, those are just like kind of desperation plays, not one that you aggressively target, but guys that will still be out there if you get a late scratch and are scrambling on Sunday. Yeah,
again, like we like these wide receivers, and I think it was actually a deeper week than we could have first guessed for week 6 waivers. But week 5 waivers were heavy on wide receivers. You can't roster 8 receivers. So at some point, there has to be some of these lesser running backs that make the jump for your team. Okay, so it's time to talk about Taysom Hill. I know everyone's eager to have that conversation and whether or not he should start over my boy, Kyle Pitts, if and when Kyle Pitts eventually gets healthy. Before we do so, let's get a word from our sponsors, Monkey Knife Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more of your speed, well, they got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. Thank goodness. It's just easy to play, easy to win daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. What are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. So we had mentioned Logan Thomas last. I actually think he ended up doing, I thought he played last week, but that's fine. And then Mo Alley Cox as well too. It's the Taysom.
Oh no, I had the Commanders inactives, and he popped up with a calf injury on the Friday injury report. Then ended up being a game time decision and was ruled out.
I don't know why I thought he played. I was looking at Dynasty Owner, and that's you mentioned Ben Skowronek. That's where I'd pick up Ben Skowronek in a place where you have 30 roster spots and guys that you're mentoring salary.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, in that type of format, he's probably taken already.
He wasn't, but I don't want him anyway because he sucks. Taysom Hill. Mr. 4 touchdowns himself, the 3 rushing, 1 passing. I had a question with some friends that are obviously know me as the fantasy guy. Should he be listed as a tight end?
He has had 1 target in the passing game through 4 weeks. So no is the answer to that.
What do you list him then?
But what do you list him
right?
as?
Exactly.
You list him as. I mean, it has to go to running back now, right? Because when you have, let's see here, what does he have? He has 21 carries and 1 target and 0 receptions.
He has more passes than he has receptions.
Yeah. He's only ran, he's ran 11 routes all year long, and he's carried the ball 21 times. So that should be your deal. But as long as he's tight end eligible, I guess you have to exploit that. And in the wasteland that is tight end, Taysom Hill is 30% rostered. Obviously, you have to pay attention to him now after he does something like this.
Yes.
I think this is going to be his ceiling game, but he's also scored in 3 of the 4 weeks that he's played.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this is what the offense is coming to without Jameis. So we'll see.
I don't know if it's without James. I wonder if it's kind of just without Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry's been banged up. Chris Olave get injured. Like, I think that matters more. Jameis could be back this week. We'll see.
Landry was a surprise scratch. People, I think, expected him to play, and he did not. Thomas, we knew wasn't going to play. Kamara's back. But
Kamara had a great game, which I was shocked by. I thought that was done. I was ready to bury Kamara, and I look foolish for doing so. I agree with you. I think Taysom Hill is not only a pickup, again, he's only 30% rostered, but a must-play, even if you are, other than if you have Kelsey and Mark Andrews and Zach Ertz. I think Taysom Hill is to that point right now. I also think Hayden Hurst might be a must-play. Now, it's, again, Higgins.
It has to deal with the landscape of tight end.
Scratch at the end here, and you're right. The landscape of like tight end 6 through 12 is not great. I think given the passing attack for the Bengals and what Hurst has been consistently able to do, he's in that same Gerald Everett vein, and we haven't talked about Gerald Everett since week 1.
Yeah, because he's rostered everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing with Burrow doesn't have enough time to make plays down the field on most situations. The offensive line just doesn't have it together yet. So who's open in a short to medium route? And it's been Hayden Hurst. And of course, some of that has to do with T. Higgins. Again, the worst thing in fantasy, you start your guy, he gets hurt on one of the first couple of series, then stands with his helmet on the rest of the game on the sidelines, apparently not ready to go back in. A little bit of frustration, again, not a doctor here. We'll make that claim. But okay, so I want to go back to Hill, because they're both 30% rostered, Hill and Hurst. Even in leagues where I had good tight ends, I put like $12 bids on Njoku a couple weeks ago. I don't think I would drop Njoku for Hill.
No, you trade Njoku. Somebody's going to need.
Somebody's going to be desperate, yeah. But so like I got Njoku for like my Kelsey leagues for bye weeks, and I might even have to flex him a couple times. I got Njoku in my Ertz leagues, thinking maybe if Hopkins comes back, the value goes down a little bit. I got Njoku in my Hawkinson league. And I can never start the right one. I can never start the right one. Of course, I benched Hawkinson in his 36-point week, start him in his 1.9-point week. That is tight ends for you. But so that's my dilemma. Like, when I think about, am I going to actually bid on Taysom Hill? 1, how much is it going to take to get him? And 2, do I have any situations where I'd actually do it? When Njoku's my tight end 2, I'm probably just leaving that alone and letting other managers spend their money on Hill. But if you want to get Hill, is it going to take double digits now?
I think so.
Someone will. Someone will pay.
Again, we are entering the bye week season. If people are smart, they're projecting ahead, and it's not just TJ Hawkinson out this week. It's going to be guys in future weeks. And with what Taysom Hill has done, I know you're buying high. I get that, and that's frustrating. But I think it's still the right call. This is an asset clearly for the team. They're utilizing them that way. And I think the same thing is for Hayden Hurst, even if and when Higgins comes back. Yep. You had also wrote down Hunter Henry, worth pointing out because Johnny Smith has been injured for most of the season. Henry had the 4 catches for 54 yards. Clearly, when the Patriots had time to practice and utilize Bailey Zappi, they were able to put together an effective offense. Also, Lions defense, easily one of the worst in the league. Yep. I think there's a lot of things that we can look at with the Patriots and say, I'm not confident so long as Zappi's playing that's going to be consistent. Yeah. Henry is one of those things.
Yeah, exactly. Not a lot of confidence. But again, in the tight end situation, I think he's worth a mention because Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, of course, in our Dynasty League, I drafted Henry as a Charger. Really happy about that. Not so happy with the results with the Patriots, and he's probably only relevant when Smith is out because, there's really only one tight end, I guess, room for one tight end in the red zone over there apparently. And so again, Henry gets a nod, but definitely on a completely lower tier than Hurst and Hill.
I want to save at least like 2 or 3 minutes for questions because we have a few that are a lot. So
we can do quick hitters for defenses.
Okay, yeah, just run through them real quick and I'll kind of get teed up for the questions.
All right, so Saints 49% roster. They're home against a very sack and very turnover prone Joe Burrow. Defense definitely is not the issue that's holding the Saints back. So you look at them. I'm going to look at the Colts at 33%. They're home again. They get the Jags. Again, defense is not the problem over in Indy. It's the offense there for sure. Browns have a very interesting matchup. Their defensive front, you mentioned their struggles against the run, but Clowney and Garrett are both back in action. That helps, with possible sacks, possible big plays, and whatever quarterback they face in New England, whether it's Zappi or Hoyer, Mac Jones, or whoever, that seems to bode well for them. I also really like the Bears at 9%. Again, defense hasn't necessarily been the problem there. They've got some young corners, but they've got playmakers. But the Bears, short week, Thursday Night Football. We know how brutally low scoring those games can be. Watch it be 31-28 this week. But anyway, they get a banged up and struggling Carson Wentz on Thursday night. We'll see if Wentz is the guy or if he's not. If he is, he's not healthy. If he plays, he's not good. So there you have it for the Bears.
Commanders defense with the flip side that
you could absolutely take the other side of that. You could target Justin Fields on the short week. Jerry, not to give away the whole pudding here, but is that even an expression? I don't know.
You made it one.
Yeah, I made it one. Yeah, Jerry had the Bears ranked number 1 in his streamers this week. So, ahead of some of these higher rostered guys. So he liked the Bears. I like the Bears just fine. So,
Jerry's
let's
not
roll
normally
with him.
wrong with that stuff too.
Yeah, he's weirdly sharp with his defense streamers.
And that and the kickers too. He does the kicker streaming too.
That's worth buying a sub alone for.
Seriously,
if you have to actually need someone to tell you what defense to stream.
Well, we've done enough promoting of RotoWire alone with our hats. I'm serious. If for nothing else, Jerry's streaming articles on defense and kicker are worth the sub alone.
It's the backfield and target breakdowns. Those are genius. So shout out Jerry. Anyway.
All right. So a couple questions here for you, Jake. I like this one. I'll sort through the best I can. Start 2.5 point PPR. Aaron Jones, Walker, Kareem Hunt, or Thielen. He also has Juju and Elijah Moore. I honestly think those are very
Jones
low
and Walker.
Okay, I would agree with Jones and Walker as well too. With that, trade Amari Cooper. Marcus has asked twice. He's very making sure he wants to know this. Trade Amari Cooper for Joe Mixon. His other receivers are Pittman, Tyreek Hill, and Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks on bye this week.
Yeah, I would take Joe Mixon.
You would take Joe Mixon. See,
over Amari Cooper?
I think I'm keeping Amari Cooper in that equation.
Especially with his other service. Well, I mean, starting 2 or 3 receivers might have something to do with that.
I guess.
But Mixon is still an RB1 for me, and that RB1 is pretty invaluable.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of Najee Harris questions. What should I do about him? I have Joe Mixon as my running back 2, but he's got Robinson and J.K. Dobbins on his bench. For me, I'm putting Dobbins in over Najee Harris.
Yeah, Dobbins starts over Harris until we get to buys and things get difficult.
I will gladly dangle Najee Harris anywhere I can, and if there's a trade offer out there. Ian Fletty, who's been a valuable member of the chat at times, and also one of our RotoWire members who's been awesome doing a lot of work for us. He traded Najee Harris for Breece Hall last week, and I said, man, I'm not sure.
Genius.
It's a genius move now. It looks fantastic.
Big brain. See, he's a Liverpool fan, so he knows what he's talking about.
That's right. Okay, Dynasty League here. Would you trade Mike Williams for Mariota and Jacobs? Mariota is just some depth, but he really wants Jacobs overall. His wide receiver core is A.J. Brown, Cooper, I would assume Amari Cooper, Hollywood, and Alec Pierce, and DK Metcalf. So pretty good wide receivers.
Yeah. I mean, Mariota, does he have any value really at all in the Dynasty League?
Yes, I think you could use him for depth purposes, but again, just think of his Mike Williams for Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I'd actually, if it's a dynasty league, I can see the case if you're going for it this year and need a running back to complete the piece of the puzzle, but I would generally rather have Mike Williams. He's 28. I think the Jacobs breakdown happens a lot earlier than the Mike Williams breakdown.
Okay, and then the Jacobs breakdown.
The Jacobs physical breakdown happens a lot earlier than the Mike Williams physical breakdown.
I hope. So I get so confused with the Chargers. Mike Williams, we had the stretch last year. Week 1 through 4 was literally wide receiver 2. Like he was just insane. We thought, oh my God, this is clearly Joe Lombardi using the Michael Thomas as Mike Williams. And then the next 8 weeks was just inconsistent. Keenan Allen has not played for the past 4 weeks. Mike Williams has been successful in 3 of them. Much
to my dismay.
Is that a correlation? I don't know. There's some confusion I have. I think I would still agree with you on that deal. Last question, and this is kind of referring to what we're discussing earlier. Somebody has Zach Ertz, but they also have DeAndre Hopkins on their bench. What do you do with both Hopkins and Hurts when they are both back?
You start them both. So I was saying I actually would dangle Zach Ertz. I would see if there's some trade options available because I do think Hopkins, if you were to cut into anyone's workload, it's Zach Ertz. Shanky dangled Zach Ertz in our Dynasty League, and I bit because my tight ends.
You didn't have to pay much for it.
It was like a 2nd-round pick and Kyle Granson.
Right.
So, I didn't have to pay much for him, but I'm sitting there with Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, and Noah Fant, none of whom are startable, and I need a tight end. So
I can trade you Robert Tonyan if you want.
Maybe we'll think about it here. I've got some other big moves cooking up in that league. Maybe we'll talk about it next week.
To happen. I'm actually ahead of you.
I intend to win now. Yes, I finally had a good week. I definitely had a slow start, and I've got some ground to make up to make sure I get the playoff spot. But once we hit week 15, I believe I intend on being unstoppable.
All right. Well, that does it for us in the week six edition of the RotoWire Waiver Wire podcast. Again, thank you all guys for participating in the conversation. The comments have been great. We've had some just fantastic.
That makes the show. I love having everyone reach out, and we'll always try to get to those questions.
I mean, we've been having some great engagement, and I want to say thank you. This has been fun to really utilize StreamYard over the last 2 or so years, and to see it really, I think, come to fruition especially for this show, Waiver Wire show, has been awesome. So we'll be back again next week discussing more of your bye weeks, right? Hopefully less stinky teams like the Texans and more critical decisions that you have to make. So thanks everyone for listening, and best of luck in your fantasy lineups.